As you probably know, there are a lot of rules that govern how to speak English properly, many of which we don't follow. But on test day, it's crucial that you do. So let's take a look at some diction rules. By the way, diction basically means using the correct word in the correct context. There are pairs of common words that are often mistakenly used in place of one another. If you memorize them, you will definitely see your score increase. Let's start with a word pair you encounter often: who and whom. These terms are used only when referring to people. For example, I went to the library with Anthony, who was also in my math class. But when do you use who and when do you use whom? This is an example using whom. To whom is the letter addressed? Here's a handy tip. You know to use whom because you can answer the question with the pronoun him. I addressed the letter to him. Whenever whom can be replaced with him or another objective pronoun like her, them, or us, you know whom is used correctly. So, for example, is the question, who is the owner of this dog, grammatically correct? Yes. It's correct because you answer the question by saying he is the owner of the dog, which uses a subjective pronoun. Subjective pronouns include he, she, they, and we. Let's take a look at one more just to make sure you understand. The boy to whom we were speaking had bright green hair. Is whom used properly? Yes, because you can answer the question, to whom were we speaking, with we were speaking to him. Since whom refers to him, it is used correctly. The next word pair is which and that. These words are used to refer to objects, animals, and places. You cannot use these terms to refer to people. Consider this sentence. My father restored the car that is parked in the garage. Here is an example of which. The gallery, which was located on the concourse level, displayed several interesting pieces of contemporary sculpture. Other words that are often used incorrectly include when and where. You use when in reference to time. Let's look at an example. A frequent cause of the flu epidemic is when people are ill, don't take time off from work. Does when in this sentence refer to time? No. When is incorrect because it is not used to refer to time. Instead, you should replace it with that and add who because of the reference to people. A frequent cause of the flu epidemic is that people who are ill don't take time off from work. In this sentence, when is used correctly. When are we leaving for the airport? Notice the when refers to time and, thus, is correct. Now, let's take a look at how to properly use where. You should use where to refer to a location or a direction. Consider this example. Lunchtime is where I see my friends. Is this correct? Is lunchtime a location? No. So this sentence is incorrect, but can be fixed by adding a location, like this. In the cafeteria is where I see my friends. Now that you've learned the most tested diction rules, let's do some guided practice. Punctuation issues can be difficult because much of what you read doesn't follow traditional punctuation conventions. And even among publications that do, there are a number of accepted style manuals with conflicting rules. ACT punctuation questions deal with very specific usage rules. Although all punctuation marks that we discuss have other correct uses as well, these uses are not likely to appear as tested issues on the ACT. This lesson, we'll discuss commas and how they will be tested. Use a comma to set off 3 or more items in a series or list. Duke Ellington made a name for himself as a leader, an arranger, and a pianist. The items in the series here are leader, arranger, and pianist. Remember the fanboys conjunctions we discussed in earlier lessons? They are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Use a comma to separate independent clauses connected by a coordinating or fanboys conjunction. Chocolate ants have yet to catch on in this country, but Americans do enjoy their chocolate. What are the two independent clauses in this sentence? What is the fanboys word? The clauses are, chocolate ants have yet to catch on in this country, and Americans do enjoy their chocolate. The fanboys conjunction is but. Use a comma to separate an introductory phrase from the rest of the sentence. In the late 1960s, NASA began to study the feasibility of developing a reusable space transportation system. The introductory clause here is, in the late 1960s. If an introductory phrase were deleted, what remains would still be a complete sentence.
And I am going to interrupt the video for just a moment because lots of my students, even my most honorable of honorable students, have a tough time with the comma after an introductory phrase. So this is the quick rule to help you figure it out, and it's not that complicated. So you need to use commas after introductory clauses, phrases, or words that come before the main clause. For example, common starter words for introductory clauses that should be followed by a comma include after, although, as, because, if, since, when, and while, as seen in this example. While I was eating, comma, the cat scratched at the door. Because her alarm clock was broken, she was late for the class. If you are ill, comma, you ought to see a doctor. When the snow stops falling, comma, we'll shovel the driveway. So if you use any of the words of although, as, because, if, then make sure you have the comma. One final thing to note about common introductory phrases with commas is if there's ever an infinitive phrase such as having finished the test, you need a comma as well, such as to get a seat, you'd better come early. After the test but before lunch, comma, I went jogging. And then finally, common introductory words should always be followed by a comma that include yes, however, or well, such as, well, perhaps he meant no harm, or yes, the package should arrive tomorrow morning, or however, you may not be satisfied with the results. And now, back to our show.
Use a comma to separate non-essential information from the rest of the sentence. On January 24, 1949, while inspecting the mill's runoff into the river, Marshall saw two shiny objects below the surface of the water. The information set up by the commas is non-essential. While inspecting the mill's runoff into the river is non-essential because it is not needed in order for the rest of the sentence to be complete. Non-essential information is any phrase or clause that could be removed from the sentence without making the sentence incomplete. This is not the same as wordy or redundant. Non-essential is used simply to describe a phrase or clause that is not necessary to the basic structure of the sentence, so that when the phrase is removed, the remaining words still comprise a complete, correctly formed sentence. These 4 rules are the only comma rules tested on the ACT. On some questions, you will have to determine when commas are used unnecessarily. Let's move on to guided practice to see how these rules are tested.